The next thing we're going to go ahead and talk about will be profiling violent crimes, which also means that you should be reading through, if you haven't already, you should be reading through the book that I recommended you buy, the Profiling Violent Crimes by Holmes and Holmes. But needless to say, I think it will be helpful, and the book itself is very helpful and interesting. So either way, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm hoping this first video is just kind of introducing us to some of what we're going to get into, and it shouldn't be quite as detailed, but I do want to talk about some things. So basically, we are going to focus on this, what we call the rationale for psychological profiling. And if you are reading in that Profiling Violent Crimes book, this would be chapter 3. So what I want to get at here is basically showing that before we get into the different types of, whether it be personalities that go into different crimes or whatever, before we get into that, we need to even discuss what actually even forms a personality, and why does the personality matter when we're talking about crime. So needless to say, some things that we need to think about, like there are 3 different areas that we can focus on. There's the biological component that factors into, not talking about theory, we're just talking about some of the biological factors as far as what helps develop someone's personality and how that impacts the crime or crime scenes. Same thing goes with culture and environment that they are living in, as well as more specifically and more importantly, what they were raised in. And then we'll talk a little bit about what we call common and unique experiences, basically saying, here's some common experiences that most people in life have to go through, learn to deal with, and some people, how they handle those situations can actually impact their personality, especially when it happens when they are fairly young. But either way, it can impact personality, and it can impact how they handle themselves in general. They can also indicate how someone may have some issues. So we'll do that, and then we will relate that to the personality and the crime, and how all those factors up here, these top 3 factors of biology, culture, and environment, or the different experiences, how that factors into personality and the crime and how we see that. So biology, if we're talking about that, let's go ahead and think about this in terms of biological things that can actually impact someone's personality. Okay, so the first thing that we can mention is IQ. And what IQ actually is, in case you aren't aware of it, IQ is the intelligence quotient. So although I may not completely agree with what the reasoning behind developing IQ, it is something that is used to help indicate someone's ability to learn or pick up something, to grasp a new concept, and also their understanding in general and it's based on a 100-point scale essentially, or at least 100. Shouldn't say it that way. 100 is the average, meaning that's where everybody, that's the average or normal scale. If you score below 100, according to the standards of an IQ test, that means you are below average in terms of intelligence quotient. Same thing goes above it. And if you want to know a limit, and we'll talk about this a lot, or at least we'll go into more detail about it, how some criminals, or especially when you talk about different types of, say, serial murderers and things like that, how intelligence plays a role. For future reference, though, usually the IQ of 70 is used for things like, say, mental issues or intellectual disabilities, for example. Someone who scores a 70 or below is typically considered to be intellectually challenged, and there's some mental component to it that they are saying they need help with. So, and geniuses, they range anywhere. They said like borderline geniuses are going to be around 140, and then genius is more like 160 and above. But like I said, it's not completely reliable. because it doesn't take into consideration a lot of things. But they do use it to help determine and categorize people. Okay, brain damage, mental illness, those are two things that we discussed earlier in the semester. Remember, we said that those two components right there can influence someone's personality, their ability to handle different stressors, how they view the world, likelihood of being criminal or deviant. So I don't think I really need to go into the great detail about that. There are other influences. Let's see here if I do want to go into, though, the different factors as far as the intelligence and brain damage and all that, that it does affect different relationships that they will have with people, how they view the world that they're actually living in. Brain damage allows it affects how different emotions can be elicited, meaning how they can be expressed, or even how well you can understand them. The information that's coming in, the sensory information, how well is it being processed? That is also affected by things like mental illness and brain damage. So those are things that to factor in and think about, because there are some of these people out here that they just can't, they have a hard time seeing the world as everybody else does due to some type of mental illness, especially, say, schizophrenics have a problem with that. And then you have people, like I said, there's a whole spectrum, when we talk about the ASD, talking about autism or anything like that, the spectrum there's a full spectrum of different ranges of autism, but on the more severe side of it, there are individuals who basically see other people as nothing more than other objects, like they would see a piece of furniture as being equivalent to another person. So those are all things to factor into a personality. Okay, so moving on to culture and environment. As you can read here, these provide the rules and regulations, words, ideas, customs, beliefs. Okay, these all help form the personality itself. So you can read, the exposure to a given culture will influence personality development. I'm going to go ahead and put up some of these things. So, for example, if you are in if you grow up in a culture where women are considered second-class citizens or just property, then it makes it far easier to treat them poorly, and it also, there is no consequence to or reason to have any issue with things like rape or battery of women, or even in some cases murder, because it's just property for different cultures throughout the world, unfortunately. Also, different customs in general about how you're supposed to treat others, that makes a difference based on culture. Also, something else to factor into it would be things like even within a normal, say, American culture society, there are subcultures within that, and so that affects things, and it can be socioeconomic, and that can affect what different experiences you have, things that you are exposed to, things you're not. There are certain difficulties that some people never experience, and then there are some people who have had to feel like they are basically fighting just simply to survive for most of their lives, and that impacts how they view everything. And see if there's anything else I want to add before we move on. And I think that pretty much covers it as far as, like I said, different cultures can actually impact your personality. And you need to, when you are profiling or trying to, looking at a crime and trying to figure out kind of a profile for the person you're looking for, those are things to factor in. There's certain things that that stick out as being different, or do they stick out as saying, hey, this kind of reminds me of this particular culture, or I can tell that based on a lack of evidence here that it also shows that there's a lack of, no presence of that. Someone would normally think of that if they grew up in what you and I would consider a stereotypical, normal culture. Okay. I don't want to belabor that point, but either way, just understand that there are different factors in that, based on different cultures, based on different experiences, and it can be socioeconomic class, it can be religious, it can be a number of different things that that you can come up with, and how you were raised by your family, by your parents, by your culture or society that you're living in. So, common and unique experiences. Let's see here. We have some common things that we all go through, or at least the vast majority of people. We all have at some point in time been in school or are still currently in school, and those things that go along with that, socialization, sometimes harassment, joking and all that, and occasionally bullying, even though I have a different opinion on bullying itself. We have jobs that we have to deal with, family life, whether it's your family you grew up with or a family that you later on have as an adult. You have your own family to take care of and have a relationship with. The music you listen to, and no, I'm not one of those people that says, oh, if you listen to one type of music that you're automatically going to be evil or anything like that. However, there are different, just like whatever books a person chooses to read, or whatever videos you choose to watch, movies you want to watch, games you choose to play. Once again, music factors in. If you listen to something long enough, watch something long enough, and are part of it, it will impact you. And here's another example. They've actually, studies have shown, and most of you probably know this just by personal experience, but studies have actually shown that different music you listen to impacts the emotion that you are feeling. And if you feel like being in a particular mood, you play that type of music, and it keeps you in that same mode of thinking. Okay, so if you listen to violent or music that talks about violence, or it's demeaning or whatever, if you constantly listen to that, it does impact how you view the world. So for as inconsequential as it may seem, it actually does have an effect. Marriage and relationships, that goes back to family life. But nonetheless, how much do you have to deal with? How difficult are things in life, such as if you're in a relationship, or say a marriage, if you are married, and there are lots of different things to deal with in a marriage, dealing with finances, dealing with relational issues, anything that may come up with children, how you want to raise them, what about potential divorce, disagreements along those lines. So there's all sorts of common experiences that people have. You have to learn how to get along with that individual, not just get along with him for a little bit, because there's a big difference between, say, dating someone and actually being married to them. Because every day you may not like that person, but you have to make that decision every day to continue to love them and to support them and be with them. And that's not always easy, but that's something that we all typically experience, some type of relationship. Okay. And yes, we all have difficulties, loss of loved ones, struggles, be it physical, mental, emotional, whatever it is, even spiritual difficulties. We all have those. So those are something that I wanted to point out. Just remember to think about that. And it forms our personality basically develops these core values of things like trustworthiness, loyalty, honesty, and reverence. So keep those in mind as we move forward. So this is kind of the end where I want to stop, and then we'll pick back up more specifics of how crime plays a part in personality